Kano. I'm Michael Klecheski. I'm the U.S. Ambassador in Mongolia, and it's my pleasure to be here today to answer the questions that came to us from the Ask the Ambassador program. This is the first time we're doing this here in Mongolia, and we're very excited about it, and I am personally. So thank you. We got over 80 questions. We got them in different ways: social media, direct messages, emails, even some that came to me personally, orally. Some of the questions duplicate one another or come close to duplicating them one another, so we've combined them in some cases. In some cases, we translated and summarized the questions, and we, of course, do that because when you have this many questions, we try to expedite the process so we can answer as many as we can. And indeed, I just want to say that I apologize that we don't have time to answer every single question. So we will post a few of the answers later. So please stay tuned. So let's get to the questions. So several people like Gerle, Damding, and Botman asked about traveling to the United States during the pandemic and vaccine requirements. This was actually one of the most frequently asked questions, and a very important one, obviously. So since January, all airline passengers to the United States aged 2 years and older must provide a negative COVID-19 viral test taken within 3 calendar days of travel. If you've recovered from COVID-19 within 90 days of your travel to the U.S., you can instead provide documentation from a licensed health care provider of this fact. As of today, the U.S. does not require proof of vaccination to enter our country, but you should monitor our embassy's COVID-19 webpage and that of the CDC closely should you need to travel. And in general, I would recommend that you monitor those sites and the embassy site to keep as up to date as you possibly can. So let's turn to a consular question involving travel, and it comes from Dulgun Erden, and it involves traveling to the U.S. for an esports competition. And I want to say at the beginning that I really enjoyed meeting with Mongolia's esports team, Team Tiger, last fall. I visited their training boot camp and even tried to learn, not too successfully, to play Counter-Strike with them. So the team really is one of the top-ranked teams in Asia. Mongolia has a lot to be proud of, and it was great to meet them. And I must say their skills and their dedication are really impressive. Regarding visas, amateur esports players would, of course, follow the same procedures, must meet the same criteria as any applicant for a non-immigrant temporary visa. Our immigration laws are quite specific, and that is that they say that to qualify for a visa, applicants must demonstrate a combination of social and family, property, economic ties that would compel them to leave the United States after a temporary visit. These ties can vary, and some examples of the ties could be things like a job or a house, family, a bank account. Our consular officers are not really making decisions on whether esports are obviously legitimate competitions or not, but rather on the applicant. So professional esports players require a specific visa, and this can take several months to process. It goes into a lot of detail that I won't share with everybody here, rather to say that we will share the details with the person who asked. More generally, we will share information on the consular process, but above all, that information is very clearly, in my view, laid out on the U.S. Embassy website. And we welcome questions, of course, but I would really urge everybody to look carefully and read carefully what's on the website first. You will save yourself, frankly, a lot of trouble by doing that in some cases. There's another question about consular travel, and that comes from Ted Delger, and that involves his question about requesting to renew his visa last year. He paid his fee, but before he was able to get a response, he arrived back to Mongolia on a charter flight, and in this situation, he was asking what can happen. This is some of the challenges we've had because of the pandemic, obviously, and the hardships caused by the ongoing travel restrictions really have affected many, many Mongolian visitors to the United States. Many of these travelers, despite challenges like these, did the right thing and requested that in the U.S., the Department of Homeland Security extend their stay while they were stranded in the U.S. And fortunately, if you applied for an extension before your original status expired, you should not have any issues returning to the U.S. as long as your visa is still valid. Again, if you have questions about the status of your visa, please contact our consular section. If you have a more general need for information, please look at the website first. I have another consular question from Mungtsetse Naranzogt. Reads like this: when will you resume travel visa interviews? Of course, that's a good question. We get that a lot. We ourselves are interested, obviously. We have resumed non-immigrant visa travel interview services, I'm glad to say. However, there's a backup in demand for visas, as you can imagine, and we recommend you plan to apply for a visa well in advance of when you plan to travel. To schedule a visa appointment or just to ask about visa fees or other visa questions, please, again, write to the email address below. We provide the information, and you'll be able to see that. Several people have asked about when we will resume immigrant visa interviews, including diversity visa program interviews. And I'm happy to tell you that we have resumed, in fact, both immigrant and diversity visa interviews. And we're processing these visas as we receive them from the National Visa Center in the United States. So then we turn to a question from Bayarma Mukhtur. The question is, what requirements does a secondary school student need to fulfill in order to apply for a visa? So first of all, let me say that we're really are welcoming qualified, serious students to study in the United States. I've been so impressed with how smart and talented young Mongolians are. I meet many of them, I'm happy to say, and how hard they work to learn English and to develop their broader knowledge. So you will first need to get what is called an I-20 form. It's an official U.S. government form issued by a certified school. Once you have that I-20, a prospective non-immigrant student can apply for the student F1 visa. Form I-20 proves students have been accepted. Once you receive this I-20 form and pay the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System fee, called the SEVIS fee, you can apply for a student visa at the embassy. So let me just pause to say that that's a mouthful, I admit. But again, this is the kind of information you can get more clearly if you look at our website, because it lays it out, I think, very clearly. And of course, we're happy to answer questions. But this is nicely explained, I think, on our website. So one important note, this is a student visa, not a work visa. Only in limited circumstances can full-time university students work in the United States. Students must also demonstrate a means of support and a significant combination of social, family, and property ties to compel their return after a temporary stay. On the consular front, again, we had a question from someone who said that their teenage children were born in the United States and would like to return. Here, my answer depends on a number of factors, like if they already have U.S. citizenship, whether they'd like to renew their U.S. passports, or whether they'd like to apply for U.S. citizenship. And in this regard, I'll just say that our consular office is standing by to help you. I recommend that, again, as usual, you first visit our website and then ask us if you have specific questions. We now turn to some vaccine and pandemic questions. And a lot of people asked about COVID-19 vaccines and President Biden's announcement that the United States is donating 80 million doses worldwide in the next 6 weeks. So Melody, Mogi, and many others asked questions like the one sent by Ms. Gantuya, who wrote, and here I'll summarize a little bit, and that is, Dear Ambassador, I'd like to express our gratitude for your great effort in strengthening the relations between the USA and Mongolia. Personally, I'm also deeply thankful for your interest in the traditional cultural heritage of my country and its promotion. It is my pride that I have been taking part in the U.S.-Mongolia Gobi Wolf Emergency Response Exchange as an interpreter for many years. I was very pleased, she continues, to learn in the news that the U.S. decided to donate 80 million doses of Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca vaccines to countries of the world. So my question is, this is her question, of course, will some of these be donated to Mongolia? And of course, thank you very, very much for your question. Thank you for your role in the Gobi Wolf disaster response and humanitarian assistance joint exercise that the U.S. and Mongolia hold every year to help our Mongolian partners prepare to help citizens in emergencies. I'll just add that I myself have attended one of these Gobi Wolf exercises, and I was really very, very impressed. It happens every year. It's very, very productive. So we're grateful to the people of Mongolia, the government of Mongolia, for the generous help that's been provided to my country, most recently in June 2020, by donating $1 million of hospital protective equipment to U.S. healthcare workers. And I'll say that really reflects a true partnership between our two countries. We're helping each other out in times of need. And I'm happy to report that Mongolia just received the latest shipment of 100,000 Pfizer vaccines through COVAX. COVAX, as many of you probably know, was established by the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi, as a global mechanism to pool procurement and to equitably distribute COVID-19 vaccines. And I'm happy to say the United States is the largest single donor to COVAX, and our initial contribution of $2 billion represents nearly 40% of all the commitments to Gavi, COVAX, which is helping many countries around the world, including Mongolia, get needed vaccines. Gavi and COVAX make the decisions on when and where these vaccines will be delivered, including, of course, involving Mongolia. Our contributions to COVAX build on our direct assistance to Mongolia of over $4 million from USAID and our Defense Attaché's Office of personal protective equipment, ventilators, training for frontline workers. That's very important. And now it puts us really on the path to ending this pandemic. And in that connection, the White House announced 80 million vaccines for the world in the next 6 weeks. I guess the point to stress here is that the United States is pursuing this path internationally through international cooperation and through international organizations. At the same time, we're also doing it bilaterally, in other words, between our two countries. And what I've just mentioned really is the bilateral as well as the multilateral. And I think it's important for people to understand that we're taking this double approach, which I think is a very constructive one. So let me turn to a question about MCC. The question really is it possible to publicize the report of the previous $250 million loan? That's from the first compact, and the breakdown of the $350 million project that's now ongoing. So MCC compacts are grants. Let me make clear, first of all, they're not loans. The first compact was completed 5 years after it was started in 2013. The total grant funding provided by MCC was almost $269 million. The program invested in 5 projects, very impressive ones. I've seen examples of what they did: property rights, health, vocational education, energy and the environment, and transportation. And in all 5 of those projects, they were designed to increase the productive capacity of Mongolians, both individuals and enterprises, and unlock opportunities for growth in domestic and regional economies. The government of Mongolia and MCC expect more than 2 million people to benefit over the 20-year lifetime of the investment. The question was asked about a description, so a detailed description of each project and the amounts invested can be found at the website that you'll see below in this text. The current MCC Mongolia Water Compact, which we're very proud of, entered into force just a couple of months ago, March 31st, and it will last, like the other one did, 5 years. The $350 million investment is going to utilize new technologies to expand the sustainable supply of drinkable, potable water and enhance the long-term financial and institutional and environmental sustainability of our city, Ulaanbaatar's water sector. It's going to do it in a couple ways. First, by constructing new groundwater wells and a state-of-the-art plant for purifying drinking water. Second, by constructing a new plant for recycling and reusing wastewater. And third, by developing and implementing a number of policy and legal, regulatory, and institutional reforms. So let me just at this point say that one of the things that I think is most admirable about MCC is not just that it builds things, I've been talking about what it builds, but also about the focus on sharing best practices. Things like fighting corruption, things like good governance. And I think what you're seeing with the second compact, as you did with the first, is this combination. Not only are we building wells, drilling wells, but also sharing the best practices that we have, best practices from throughout the world where MCC is and has been working with the government of Mongolia. So your government has agreed to contribute up to $111 million of additional funding to support the investment, which is among the largest partner country contributions in the history of the MCC. MCC is very excited about this, so are we. A detailed tracking of the compact investments can be found, again, at the link below. So let me now turn to some political questions. Let's start with one from Uranchimeg, who wrote, "Hello, is there democracy in Mongolia? Is there democracy in China? And how do you rate this?" I'm always really struck by the fact that Mongolia's democracy really is vibrant, and it's something that all Mongolians should be proud of. In fact, our strategic partnership between our two countries really is founded on what I'd call shared values: democracy, human rights, free and fair private sector economic growth, and the sovereignty of nations. These are fundamental values, I think, for both our countries. And that's why our partnership is so strong and really even growing closer under this administration in the United States. These democratic values, in practical terms, something I'm always focusing on, mean that we stand for human rights and respect for diversity and the freedom of expression. It doesn't, of course, mean that there aren't problems in both our countries, but I think it's fair to say that as long as we remain committed to the fundamental principles of democracy and our democratic institutions, that phrase, "we the people," really do have the power to fix our problems and to address them. Both our countries had important elections, of course, in 2020 last year, and Mongolia, as you all know, have a presidential election coming up shortly. That is maybe the most important part of this entire video today, which is that democracy, it can be complicated, even messy, and sometimes candidates or parties do not win. But after all, democracy is the best way to ensure that we can hold leaders accountable, give people a voice, protect our freedoms and human rights, and provide sustainable opportunities through inclusive and transparent means. So the embassy and the U.S. government really are actively promoting peaceful, free, and fair elections. But we're also being strictly neutral and non-partisan. Very important that we are like that. We strongly encourage everyone eligible to participate in this democracy by registering and voting on Election Day. Just regarding China, I think there's no question that it is not a democracy and that the most cherished principles of democracy are neither guaranteed nor protected there. And my president, President Biden, has been very clear about his concerns that actions by the People's Republic of China, including in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, regarding Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, and economic coercion towards our allies undermine democracy and the rule-based order that maintains global stability. So as my Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, said, the U.S. relationship with China is going to be competitive where it should be, collaborative where it can be, and adversarial where it must be. I think it's a good formulation of our approach. We will always stand up for democratic principles, for our people and our friends and allies and partners. Let me now turn to another political question. It reads, our presidential election, Mongolian presidential election, is around the corner, and whether observers from the U.S. will be attending. So I can tell you that I'm very excited to see democracy in action in Mongolia again, as I did the last two elections. And I'm also very proud that through USAID and other agencies, we're supporting inclusive and participatory democracy, good governance, and other qualities that are really important. For example, USAID is running a $3 million program to provide voter information and encourage the participation of women and young people in elections. We've also developed a wonderful, really powerful group of young champions of democracy through this program that I really love called Leaders Advancing Democracy. It's called the LEAD program. And just like in last year's parliamentary election, embassy diplomats and staff really are planning to visit some polling stations in Ulaanbaatar to observe Mongolia's democracy in action during the presidential election. They will be accredited from the General Election Commission, very important point. The aspiration for free and fair elections and the peaceful transition of power is one of the fundamental democratic values shared by our two countries and by the people of both the United States and Mongolia. And as I said earlier, that it really is one of the cores that makes our relationship so strong and so successful. Turning now to an economic question, several people like Tsabati and Engtur asked about connections with the American IT sector, digital entrepreneurship, investors, related questions. Those really are great questions, and it's one of the highest priorities of our economic diplomatic work, that is, to help diversify Mongolia's economy. Private sector growth has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And the tech sector has so much potential here in Mongolia because you can ship, to put it in quotes, a digital product with the push of a button to any of your third neighbors. So our economic section and our public affairs section of our embassy have brought over several very exciting American experts like Terry Jones, the founder of Travelocity and Kayak, and Brandon Boynton, who was a young tech entrepreneur who ran a digital entrepreneurship startup boot camp. And we've supported a number of workshops and clinics for what is a burgeoning, growing tech sector here in Mongolia. We also, of course, offer a number of English language programs and scholarships for those in the tech sector to advance their careers. Obviously, this is all on hold during the pandemic, but I am confident we'll be back at it very soon. Another question comes from Dado Damdin Batarsukh and many of you who asked about how increasing direct investment from the U.S. to Mongolia after the COVID economic recession might happen. And these questions really do address one of our highest priorities, which is fostering trade and investment and economic ties between our two countries. In my Senate testimony, as I always point out, the testimony I gave before being confirmed as ambassador, I listed this commercial and economic relationship as my highest priority. So first, we know how hard local businesses have been affected by the pandemic in Mongolia and, of course, in the United States, throughout the world, in fact. And we're doing everything we can to help Mongolia recover from this economic downturn. One example is the USAID BEST program, one I'm very proud of. It's a 5-year, $15 million program to help small and medium enterprises, SMEs as we call them, improve their operations and acquire financing to grow their businesses. Please check them out on Facebook if you're interested. I have visited a BEST office outside of Ulaanbaatar, including in addition to the ones here. I've been very impressed with it. Of course, the MCC program I spoke about earlier, addressing Ulaanbaatar's water supply program, is one of the largest commitments the U.S. has made in the whole Indo-Pacific region. It will bring new jobs over its 5-year lifespan and increase Ulaanbaatar's water supply by 80%. But I would add simply that it's more than just about water, it's about business and the ability of companies to operate effectively. So finally, there's our efforts in various ways to improve Mongolia's transparency and its good governance. Full implementation of this transparency agreement between our two countries is another very important area. This agreement gives the public the ability to comment on proposed rules affecting international commerce prior to becoming final. It's a real shift in the relationship between rule makers and civil societies, and it's the single biggest step Mongolia could take to attract international investors. In other words, we put a lot of stake in the transparency agreement. So we devote a lot of time to Mongolia's investment climate. Throughout the world, U.S. embassies produce investment climate statements. And I think you'll find them interesting. We produce them based on feedback from the business community locally and throughout the world. They can be seen on our website. Obviously, they're public documents. But we think they're a good summary of our perspective, at least, on the investment climate in Mongolia and ways that that Mongolia can improve that climate and therefore really attract more investors, in our case from the United States, but really throughout the world. So let me now turn to some educational and cultural questions, always very important and something close to my heart. So Otkon Chimeg asked about the possibility of building partnerships among deaf and hard of hearing communities in our two countries. So let me start by thanking you for all your efforts as the founder and head of the Parent Teacher Association of Mongolia, Otkon Chimeg. And let me add that parent-teachers associations are tremendously important and very popular in the United States. They produce a really great dialogue between parents and the schools, and that's really critical to good communication. Yeah, and talking about the PTA organizations, let me just say that as you, our questioner, know, through a USAID program, the PTA program of Mongolia, PTAM, organized a series of events for voters with disabilities to engage with political parties before the election in 2020, in October 2020. USAID will continue to work on programs with PTAM that involve persons with disabilities in the future. Thanks also for the question, but also for the invitation to meet with you and the Deaf Club of Mongolia. We will definitely be in touch about that. And we've given grants to local organizations to teach American Sign Language. We even brought the special advisor on international disability rights, that is President Obama's special advisor, Judith Heumann, to Mongolia for a speaker program on the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I know her from previous assignments, and I found her a wonderful person to be working with, and I'm really pleased that we at this embassy had this relationship with her as well. So if you'd like to bring in American experts in sign language education, you might want to consider the Fulbright Specialist Program. Host institutions can apply to host an American expert for a short-term project. And again, this is something you can check out on our website to learn more about. One of my favorite, but I have to admit, most challenging questions came from Amgalang, and it is, what is your favorite museum in Mongolia? Well, that really might be the hardest question I get. And the reason is actually that there are so many museums in Ulaanbaatar that I like very much. And let me also add that whenever I travel outside of the city, in every Imag capital, in every Sum that has a museum, I kind of make a point of visiting that museum and always find something really fascinating there. So there are 5 big museums, I would say, in Ulaanbaatar, that all of which I really am very fond of. There's the Zanbazaar Museum with its presentation on Buddhist art and Buddhist history. There's the National Museum with its presentations on Mongolia's history more broadly. Modern Art Museum, focusing on what we might call the 20th century and into the 21st century. And then there are 2 museums that were originally monasteries/temples. One, of course, being the Chögyam Lama Temple Museum, and the other being the Bodhan Museum. I mention them all because every one of them focuses on one aspect of Mongolia that is very important to this country, and that I have to tell you, I find very, very fascinating and enjoyable. And I would also add that we're very, very proud that the U.S. Embassy, like all embassies, have an ambassador's fund for cultural preservation. It does work on cultural preservation of a whole range of institutions here in Mongolia. And all those 5 museums that I mentioned all got grants at one point or another from this program. But I will just add in addition that there are a lot of really cool smaller museums here in Ulaanbaatar that I also really enjoy visiting. And in that connection, rather than list them all to you, I'll tell you that it seems like every time I go to one of these museums, bigger ones, smaller ones, I always put it on my social media. It always seems to end up on Twitter, for instance, and that's where you can find out where I've been and what I find particularly enjoyable on a particular weekend or a particular day. There's another education and cultural question that I wanted to talk about, and the question reads like this. Hello, there are thousands of young Mongolians who want to study and work in the U.S., but unfortunately only those who have wealthy families are able to travel to the States. The people from underrepresented families usually don't get that opportunity. So what is your embassy doing to provide equal opportunity for everyone? That's a great question. And I have what I think is a good answer, which is to say we actively promote equity, diversity, and opportunities for all in our academic programs, scholarships, opportunities. A few years ago, we started doing tours to all the provinces of Mongolia to speak with people outside the capital here from all backgrounds, that's important to stress, about our many scholarship opportunities in partnership with our alumni association, MASA. We also offer free, comprehensive academic advising services through our Education USA office, which has offices in various provinces, not just in Ulaanbaatar. They will not only help you find the right university in the United States that fills your needs, but they are also committed to helping you with financial assistance and scholarships. We also run English language programs for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds and recruit people from all social and economic backgrounds to apply for scholarships. In other words, that is a real priority for us. And we take it very, very seriously and really work very hard to make sure the opportunities are widespread and they're for everyone. Another cultural and educational question reads like this. Thank you very much for this opportunity. What will you want to do most so as to improve more Mongolia and American communication in the near future? So I think the key to unlock a better future really depends on English, first and foremost. This isn't just to make friends or to do business with Americans, but if you want to trade, study, research, or work in technology, in public health, in tourism, journalism, international relations, or any other fields, English is extremely helpful. And you might even say essential. So the U.S. Embassy makes this one of our highest priorities. We offer a number of programs to help Mongolians learn English, like boasting Peace Corps volunteer teachers throughout the country, free online English classes, which are called MOOCs, and many exchanges and professional development opportunities for English teachers across Mongolia. I just did an event, virtual it's true, with several hundred teachers of Mongolian teaching English to Mongolian students. It was very satisfying for me, but it really just reflects our commitment to that effort. Another education and cultural question comes from Gawa, and it reads like this. Is there any chance that you and the embassy would be interested to get involved in arts and artists' residency programs and artists' cultural exchange programs between our two countries? Yes. First of all, it's nice to hear from you again and to learn more about your Mars Artist Residency Program. And let me say, yes, we sure are interested in cultural exchanges. It's another one of our priorities. Since I've been here, we have brought over an American jazz rock band, Aberdeen, to collaborate with San Juniper and Meet Magnolian and The Who. We brought a hip-hop collective, Next Level, to run a dance and rapping and music production workshop. It was memorable. And during the pandemic, we worked with the Arts Council of Mongolia on collaborative performances between artists from the two countries called Arts from Home. And now we're working on the Motion Mongolian International Dance Festival and Artists in Resilience with other embassies and international organizations as well. In other words, there's a tremendous amount we're doing, but we won't stop there. So if you have a good idea for a small grant, we would very much love to hear from you. We invite civil society and NGOs to send in proposals, and you can learn more about how to submit that on our website. Please take a look at our website. So another question is about what is my perspective on Mongolian youth, on Mongolian young people, and what do I advise for them? I have to start by saying the young Mongolians are really smart and connected. They're talented, and it struck me how they are committed to democracy. They seem very eager to learn and make the most of any opportunity that's presented to them, and we present many, I believe. So my main advice would be to expand your horizons and continue to dream big. If you study hard and you learn English and apply for scholarships to study in the United States, I really believe your future will be incredibly bright. As a third neighbor and friend of Mongolia, the U.S. will be there. I think it's fair way to put it, will be there at your side. Many of you, including Solongo and Bayarma, asked about or expressed interest in the Fulbright Scholarship Program. And I'm glad you're asking about that because I believe that the Fulbright program is one of the best ways to improve lives, to tackle shared challenges together, and really to bring our countries even closer together. This Fulbright program is responsible for moving more students and scholars and researchers around the world than any other force in world history from our perspective. Last year, in fact, we celebrated 10 years of Mongolia contributing to the U.S. Mongolia Scholarship Program. And this year, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the worldwide Fulbright program because it exists throughout the world. So hopefully you are interested and wondering how to get started. So step one is to study English because it's never too soon. And we have plenty of resources, as I mentioned, on our website to do that. Step two would be to read about the Fulbright program on our website. And step three is, don't take it from me, listen to Mongolian Fulbright alumni. Throughout the year, we're featuring podcasts and social media stories about our illustrious alumni in Mongolia and how they're giving back to their communities here. So like and subscribe to our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts so you don't miss any of these podcasts. Turning to the question of climate change, Mogi wrote, we're at a very crucial point where we need to take immediate action on impending issues like global warming and water supply. What issues are you most worried about? So first of all, thanks, Mogi, for your question. Several of you asked similar ones and commented on the embassy tree planting volunteer project that my colleagues and I had an opportunity to focus on. And some of you shared their tree planting work with us. So thank you for those important efforts as well. You know, Mongolia is such a beautiful place with really amazing natural scenery and wilderness areas. All us Americans are struck by that. It's so important to work together to protect our environment here as well, of course, as everywhere. So our president, President Biden, is taking swift and I think very bold steps to address climate change, both at home in the United States and around the world. First of all, the U.S. rejoined the Paris Agreement on the president's first day in the White House. And 1 week later, he announced he would convene a summit of world leaders to tackle this climate crisis together. Mongolia's special envoy on climate change, Dr. Batjargal, was invited to participate in the climate crisis ministerial roundtable. We talked about it, he and I later. Climate change really is making the weather harsher, which threatens local herders and the country's cashmere industry here in Mongolia, as well as food security and public health and infrastructure. So USAID is partnering with Mongolia to find solutions to mitigate and prevent climate change. That includes programs to help build resiliency against natural disasters for instance, Mongolian herding communities, investing to help develop a more sustainable and independent and more modern energy sector, and supporting the Kashmir sector effectively to compete in international markets. From the Mongolian side, we would like to see a commitment to shift new power generation from coal to renewable energy, with several coal-fired power plant projects in the works. From our perspective, it is really important that Mongolia join the rest of the world in moving toward a renewable energy future. With the COP26 marquee climate change summit coming up in November, we'd like to see Mongolia join our vision, a shared vision of banning new coal-fired power plants. That's a vision we hope to share with Mongolia, and we consider that truly important. There's another question involving USAID, which I've been talking about quite a lot here today, and that is, how are you planning to improve the transparency and accessibility of the best BEST and other USAID programs? In a strong sign of how important our relationship with Mongolia is, USAID is ramping up its assistance and development work here. And my country has an extensive system of inspectors general who investigate allegations of waste, fraud, abuse. So if you know of any waste, fraud, or abuse of U.S. taxpayers' dollars, individuals can report this to our General Accountability Office's Fraud Net, and we can provide more information on that. Turning to defense and related assistance, we got a question which is as follows. Would it be possible to organize cooperative emergency, ambulance, and first aid skill capacity building events or programs? And the answer is yes. We're actually doing this already. Through our Office of Civil Military Support Element, that's what we call it, we have teamed up with the Society for Emergency Medicine to develop first aid programs and training on paramedicine. I actually took part in the closing ceremony. We also sponsor the annual Han Quest multinational exercise, which is hosted by your Mongolian Armed Forces, and Gobi Wolf, which is a humanitarian assistance and disaster preparedness exercise we run every year. in partnership with the Mongolian National Emergency Management Administration and your armed forces. So if you'd like to suggest additional programs or learn more, please do write to your local NEMA office or to the U.S. Defense Attaché's office here at the embassy. Let me turn to another defense question. It comes from @tenderfoot6688, and it reads like this. Our Army asked for 2 C-130 Hercules airplanes to transport our soldiers to and from Afghanistan, but the request was denied. Can you please explain why? So, first of all, let me say the U.S. is proud to support and stand with Mongolian peacekeepers. We have a distinguished record of that. As the United States begins the process of withdrawing from Afghanistan, we'd like to thank the Mongolian Armed Forces for their really tremendous contributions and sacrifices in supporting this NATO-led missions and the United States military over a long period, 18 years, right? The last 18 years. The U.S. has provided air transportation to the Mongolian Armed Forces for every deployment in Afghanistan. In some cases, when a U.S. military plane was not suitable or possible, the U.S. government paid for the use of commercial airlines, for instance, Hunu Air. So it's been my honor to join with my colleague, the defense attaché here, Lieutenant Colonel Liu, to personally hail and farewell Mongolian deployments, no matter the time of day or weather, at the airport. And that's really been another one of those moments of great satisfaction for me. So I've gotten a few very much appreciated personal questions here. One is from someone who identifies themselves as Artichoke Mongolia, who doesn't really have any questions but wishes us, good luck in our diplomatic efforts. So thank you. We extend the same wishes of good luck to you. Then Baji Narambat asked for advice for young people pursuing a diplomatic career. And let me just say, as I think I said earlier about how, advice on how to see your future life in general, the wider your experiences, the more you know about the world, the more skills you develop. I think that really helps you develop your prospects for the future in general, but also for a diplomatic career. As a diplomat myself, I have to tell you, we are focused on such a broad range of issues that the more we know about a little bit about everything, and ideally a lot about everything, the stronger our ability to be good diplomats. But of course, speaking to a theme I talked about earlier, knowing English is a tremendous, almost vital element of diplomacy, and we very much recommend and are very willing to help, and in fact anxious to help Mongolian young people, in fact Mongolians generally, work on their English, improve their English. So I very much appreciate that question. It was very good. Munkbat MB asks, where do you want to go in the summer after this pandemic? And I can only tell you that I'm really looking forward to traveling around the country. We will be staying in the country as much as we can in Mongolia. And there are a lot of places we haven't been to yet in your beautiful country. I've taken quite a few trips in Mongolia, mostly before, of course, the pandemic. Everywhere I've been, it's been fascinating, it's been beautiful, it's been sort of personally very rewarding for me. I am a city guy, so although I love nature and I'm astonished at the beauty of Mongolian nature, I also like to visit Mongolia's urban communities, and I learn a lot from visiting those places too. So I think we'll be going to the Gobi again soon. I hope we'll get some visitors from the United States and from elsewhere. And we very much look forward to going to new places ourselves. There's still a lot we haven't visited, but also to taking our friends there and sharing this country with them. Gobi is definitely one place we want to go to. Mongolia's north is another one that we've really come to love and look forward to visiting again soon. But the whole country offers so many opportunities that we're very, very much looking forward to that. Wold asked, do we have, when I say we, my wife and me, do we have a dog? The answer is we do not have a dog. In fact, we've never had a dog. I think the reason for that is because when you're a diplomat and you're moving from country to country every 2 to 3 years, it's kind of hard on your pets. Many of my embassy colleagues, however, do have pets. I'm really in admiration of the fact that they do. But for our part, we don't have any kind of pets. So it's something that I think makes sense from the point of view of our family, given how much we have to move around the country. Then I got another question about my hometown, childhood, younger days, and travels as a diplomat. And the question concludes, how much of a gap was there between your wish to become a diplomat and the realization, which I think is a really interesting question. I haven't heard in quite a while, but so I'm from New York City. Those of you who know the New York accent may notice that occasionally I give it away. I did in my last answer because I said the word dog, which is a New York way of saying it. I'm very proud of my city. I like big cities, as I mentioned, and therefore I'm also a very big fan of Ulaanbaatar. Of course, it's not as big a city as New York is, but it's one that has a nice, interesting urban agglomeration. And I grew up in New York City, but then I went to Washington, D.C., to Georgetown University for my college, then returning back to my native New York before I became a diplomat. So diplomacy has been a really important part of my life, but it's really been a satisfying and enjoyable part of my life. With regard to the question of the gap between my dreams of being a diplomat and my realization, I have to say, the gap isn't really that big. There's so much about diplomacy that's important and satisfying both to me and to my diplomatic colleagues at this embassy. We always find it fascinating to live abroad. And part of the reason we do that is because a great deal of the satisfaction comes from building these bridges between ourselves, our culture, and the culture of whatever country we're in. So the bridges we think we've built between the U.S. and Mongolia have been, at least for me, one of the most satisfying aspects. But, meeting fascinating people, that's one of the joys of being a diplomat. Representing your own country, serving your own country, I must say I genuinely take pride and satisfaction from that. So I find diplomacy a wonderful career, and for my own part, I've lived in many countries as a diplomat. I've always found it a fascinating experience, and I've never actually been an assignment as a diplomat in any foreign country, which I didn't like. So the gap, in other words, as you ask, is virtually non-existent. My dreams really are realized in my diplomatic career. A couple of people asked, you wore a dell when you gave a greeting on Mongolian national holiday. What part of our traditional Mongolian dress attire attracted you? And when you first tried them on, what conversation were you two, that is my wife and me, having about your impressions? We're very interested to know. So I think Mongolian attire is absolutely beautiful. And it's beautiful in its own right, but it's also, I think, beautiful because it captures what I think is one of the most attractive aspects of Mongolia, and that is the strength of tradition in your country. It doesn't mean that you don't also modernize, and one of the other aspects of your country that I find fascinating is this combination of the traditions combined with modern trends. You see that, for instance, in a nice example is the Who music group, which certainly uses traditional musical instruments, but also has a very modern musical style, to put it mildly. So that's one of the things that we like very much about Mongolian attire. Diplomats, when they come to a country, they really have to learn sometimes from scratch. And my wife and I have learned a great deal about Mongolia, about its traditions, about its attire. But everything we've learned about it has been absolutely satisfying and a great joy for us. Finally, I guess the last question is, from what I imagine being an ambassador must mean that no matter how different your personal view is, you have to be able to understand the public perspective and always reach common ground. Is being the U.S. ambassador to Mongolia a tough job? So from my perspective, I have to say it is something greatly satisfying to be able to understand Mongolian perspectives, to understand their political situation, their geography. But I think one of the things that I think we understand and that gives us an enormous amount of satisfaction is this deep-seated valuing of democracy in your country. I really do actually believe that, and in all my experiences with Mongolians, that's been very, very striking to me. It's also nice that although my command of Mongolian is very small, I've been able to find ways to communicate even with Mongolians who don't speak English. You know, the ability to communicate, not just linguistically, but in terms of speaking the same language, sort of emotionally, is something that's been very, very satisfying to me, and also has helped reach common ground. But I think those underlying values that we really do share, I think democracy, the free market, I think those are all elements of the common ground that give us a good basis to work together. We don't always agree on everything, but I think the fact that we start from a rather common starting point is very important in terms of being an ambassador in Mongolia and communicating well, trying to develop further those common grounds. So let me just conclude. Maybe it's a nice way to conclude by saying that in our 2 years here, my 2 years here, and my wife's, we found this place tremendously satisfying. For me professionally, it's also been a remarkable period because the relationship, which has been strong really throughout the 30 plus years of our diplomatic ties, has been growing very steadily over these 2 years, even despite the pandemic. And I feel really lucky that I'm the ambassador to a country that with which our country has developed such great ties, particularly over these last couple of years. So I'm very optimistic about our future, and I hope that our Ask the Ambassador session today has been interesting for you. I thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on social media and maybe communicating in person. Mashik Bayatla, thank you very, very much.